Well, hello everybody. Great to have you here. It's great to see so many people who are joining. And today we're going to talk about AI. So it's a topic that is very hot and topical at the moment. And I want to give you an idea. I've called this kind of been a bit grandiose here, and I've called it your AI master plan. So this is if you're a leader and you're looking to implement an AI policy or framework or guidelines, then this will help you plan that. And so for the people who are here live, great to see you here. For the people who are watching the recording, this will also be available for you, and you'll get more value if you're here live. So hello to the people who are watching the recording, but I hope you still get some value from it later. So let's just get one thing out of the way. Some people give this a different name, so I'm calling it a master plan. Some people call it a policy, a framework, guidelines. We're talking about the same sort of things. So we're saying if you are responsible for creating some sort of AI framework for your team or your organization, then this will be valuable for you. And whatever you call it, you're going to put something together that will help you and help your team and organization use AI responsibly and effectively. So there's bad news and good news in the hour that we've got together. The bad news is at the end of it, you won't be able to walk out with a full AI policy, but I think you weren't expecting that, right? Because it's quite complex, but also it's going to be different for everybody. The good news is what I want to give you in the time that we've got here are some principles for thinking about and planning your AI policy. Towards the end of this session, I will give you a public AI policy or framework that you can download from a very large organization. They've made it publicly available. So I'll give that to you as perhaps a starting point for yours as well. But today, I'd like you to think about what you're going to put into your AI policy or framework. So my standard rules of engagement for my presentations, for people who've been here before, may be familiar with them. The first thing is I want to give you things to think about. The second thing is I'd like you to be a bit playful and interact, and especially if you're here live, of course, you can do that. If you're watching the recording, you don't get as many opportunities for that, but please interact as we go. And I'll show you some ways that we can do that as we go. So I'll stop at various times to answer questions. I'll ask you questions as we go, so please engage and you'll get more value out of this session. And the main thing is, I'd really love you to get some real takeaway actions that you can put into place. Okay, so a couple of interactions to start with. Let's do this. So the first thing I'd like you to do is you'll see on your Zoom, you've got this option to do reactions where you can show emojis. And can I ask you now to use that? Let's use it for something real. So everyone's thinking about AI. Oh, good. Some people are clapping. Good. Thank you for that. What's your current feeling about AI? For yourself in your professional life, your personal life, pick an emoji and raise it as a reaction. Okay, I can see some people are excited. Thumbs up, good. Thumbs up. It's interesting when I run this with different groups, some people have the worried emoji or the surprise and they don't really know what's happening, but it's great to see lots of thumbs up here. Good. Okay, a little bit of worry there. Excellent. Okay, so the other thing I'd like you to do is, and let's just do this in the chat, if you can type in, just so we know who's in the room, if I ask you the question, are you currently responsible for crafting an AI policy, framework or guidelines in your team or organization? Can you just type in the chat, yes or no? Just so I get an idea, and so we all get an idea of who's in the room. And it doesn't matter if you say no, because I think this will still be useful for you. But let's see where we are at the moment. Okay, so it's about 50-50 at the moment. In fact, it's turning out to be very close to 50-50, and that's really useful. So it's useful to know that half the room here are actually, at the moment, responsible for the AI policy for their team and maybe even for the whole organization. So that's going to be really useful for us as we go forward, and especially in this session, I'm going to cover 3 things to help you think about your AI policy. So the first one is, why are you doing it? And you might think this is obvious, I know why I'm doing it, but I want to give you a little bit of nuance around that and give you 2 buckets that you're going to that you can think about when you're planning your AI policy. And the second one is, who are you doing it for? And again, you might think this is obvious, and I think there's one really obvious group of people that you're doing it for, but there may be others as well. And the third thing, and this is the one that I actually like the most, is how are you going to make sure that whatever you create in terms of your policy, how are you going to make sure that it's not just something that's written and then put in some folder somewhere on somebody's somewhere on your corporate intranet and never looked at again? So how do you make sure that it stays alive and continues? Okay, so that's those are 3 things I want to look at. So the why, the who, and the how. So I can tell you that I've been using AI for a long time, and AI has been around for a long time, even though it was really only the launch of ChatGPT in 2022 that really elevated it into a lot of people's consciousness. When I studied computer science at the University of Western Australia more than 30 years ago, my computer science thesis was about AI. So it has been around for a long time. And in fact, it's quite interesting. Like yesterday, I took my niece out to dinner. You'll actually get to meet her later in the presentation. I took her out to dinner, her and her boyfriend. She's 19 at the moment. And they were asking me about AI, and I said, like I was doing AI in the 1900s, and she goes, "That's so funny that your thesis was about AI. Now you could get AI to write your thesis." And so look, things have changed, right? So this is something that's obviously very hot topic at the moment, very topical at the moment. So it's interesting that even though it's changed, it's been around for a while. So I'm sharing with you, and especially for the last 10 years, I've talked to lots of leaders about AI, but now, because of the power of generative AI, people are doing a lot more with it. Okay, so let's look at this first area. The first area is, why are you creating your AI policy? And I'm going to start perhaps in a slightly unusual way, and perhaps not what you expected, but we'll look at what are the principles that you think are going to go into your AI policy. And I'm going to ask you actually here, and we can do this anonymously. So what I'm going to ask you to do is think about, I'm going to ask you to type in the chat, but think about this first. Think about what is the most important principle that you want to include in your AI policy. So some people will say things like privacy, security. So think about a word or 2. Okay, so what's the most important principle? You're probably going to have quite a lot of them, but of them, and in fact people have started typing, so let's go into this. So let me bring this up. So type in the chat what you think is the most important principle, starting now. So we've got ethical, security, okay, optimization, integrity. If you type a long phrase, it won't appear on the list, so choose like 1 or 2 words. Accountability, privacy, good. Okay, integrity, security, accountability, is good. Okay, guidelines, yeah, interesting. Okay, good. So thank you for sharing that. If you want to keep adding, you can. But only the last item that you put in will appear on here, right? So yes, and some people are saying, like JF is saying, we'll get back to that because there'll be opportunities for questions in chat. Okay, so let me show you one thing that this phrase here. It's an old Latin phrase, which is primum non nocere or nocere, depending on which version, dialect of Latin you speak, and it means first do no harm. And it's been in when medical professionals, doctors, they graduate for the first time, they take this like code of ethics, and this is one of the things, this oath. Some people think this is from the Hippocratic Oath. It's not, but it's from a similar sort of document and similar sort of oath that doctors take when they first join the medical profession. And first do no harm seems like a pretty good way to start, right, for doctors. In fact, Google's original motto was do no evil. And they've quietly retired that now because people have accused them of doing some evil, and that's no longer their corporate motto. But look, first do no harm and do no evil are pretty good starting points for your policy. And those are the sort of things, like some of the words that you put in there are about protecting. So it's about, and let me show you those again, that so things like security, privacy, ethical use. Okay, so that's about saying using AI with some guardrails around it so we protect humans, whoever the human stakeholders are. Now, there's another part to this as well. And the other part of it, and this is why I said there are two buckets, when you're writing your framework or your policy, definitely, by all means, have these things about definitely have the things around protect, but also have the things around enable. So protect is the first bucket where you're putting guardrails around it. The second bucket is the enable. So if you think of a car and you're driving the car, enable is about everything you put into the engine so you can drive faster. It's pressing the accelerator. Protect is making sure that you've got good brakes and you've got good seat belts and you've got other safety features in there. So there are a few words here which are about enable. So innovation, I think, is a really good one. Let's see what else we've got. Optimization might be one, and guidelines is broad, so it could cover both of them. But imagine if your AI policy had some of these enable things in there, and most policies don't. Most policies are all about here's how we're going to use it, and here are the limitations on its use. But let me show you some other examples. So, for example, there's an AI assessment, self-assessment that I give to leaders and organizations. By the way, I'll give this to you as well later in the presentation for you to download. But look at some of the things on here. We've talked to employees about the potential benefits of AI. We have a plan to, number 11, we have a plan to train our employees on AI. We encourage leaders and managers to experiment with AI. We've identified our internal AI champions within our teams. We've identified how AI enhances our customer experience. So those are the sort of things that fall into that enable category. So when you're crafting your AI policy, can I invite you to include both of those areas in there? So one of them is absolutely put the protect things in there, but also think about how you're going to craft your policy. So it's not only going to talk about protections around AI for stakeholders, but also how it's going to enable you, because then you get the best of both worlds. And the good thing about driving a car fast is that if you've got seatbelts and brakes and good safety features, you can actually drive faster. Okay, so don't think that one's going to hold you back from the other. Okay, I'm going to stop and have questions as we go. So if you've got questions, type them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. There'll be a couple of other opportunities as well to ask questions. So ask your questions, and I'll do my best to give you as much time as possible for us to answer as many questions as possible. So have you got any questions about this? The principles of what you might want to include in your AI policy. Actually, one of the common questions that I get asked is what form should this policy take? Should it be a document? Should it be publicly available, as in publicly available, or should it be private, internal within an organization? The answer is, unfortunately, it depends. Okay, so it can be something that is internal, but some parts of it you expose publicly, and we'll talk about that in the next section. But also, it can be something that it doesn't have to be just a text document. I know one organization who's written the formal text document, but they also have a little corporate video, which internal video, which talks about here's how we're going to use AI, and it has both those buckets, the protect and the enable. Okay, any questions? I don't see any coming in just yet. There's the one comment from JF was about this one here: computer can never be held accountable, so it mustn't make a management decision. You're right. And so AI has been used a lot to assist in decision making, and the challenge is how much do you let it assist and how much do you trust. Even if you're going to make the final decision, how much are you going to trust the results that you get? So I know one major bank in Australia, I won't say which one, but actually it's a positive thing. I'll just say it starts with W, ends in Estpac, and they've got a very good policy around decision making. So AI is used to, it has some influence over assessing a mortgage loan application, but their policy is that any loan application that AI would reject, a human has to assess it. So they've got that check in place to make sure that nothing gets rejected purely by AI. Okay, question here from Bikram. How often would you have to update it? The AI sphere is updating at such a fast speed. Yes, exactly, Bikram. And if you look at the sort of things that I had here in the self-assessment, these are the sort of things that are broad enough that you don't necessarily need to update it frequently. In fact, baked into this list here, if you look at the one that says we've identified internal AI champions who can lead the way, they're the sort of people who are going to be highlighting some of the potential issues in the future that might then feed back into your policy. But you don't have to keep updating the policy and the framework and the guidelines. Use it as a starting point, and then you can build from that. Yeah, how do we define ethics, right? Would a human definition be different from a computer's definition? So again, I'm asking you, JF, in the context of your policy, are you going to put that in there? Are you going to put something in around, you're going to use ethical AI, or are you going to say they're humans who are making ethical decisions about using AI? And I'd recommend the latter. Okay, let me continue. So I'll give you a couple of other opportunities to ask questions, and just like that, ask them in the chat and I'll answer them as they come up. The second area I want to look at is this area of who are you creating your AI policy or your framework for. And this is not only for in terms of who's using it, but also who is it for, so who's interested in it and has an interest in it. And I think the obvious answer is for the people in the organization. Or if you're leading a team, it's the people in your team, if you're creating a policy for the people in your team. But there are multiple stakeholders. And can I ask you now, actually, let me ask you this. So, can you write in the chat who another stakeholder might be that might be interested in your AI policy or might even be affected by it? So the obvious one, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples, is you might say customers. Okay, so yep, clients or customers, good. Risks, okay, so another part of the organization. Yeah, patients, exactly. So again, in certain sectors, they are essentially your customers, brokers, people with disability. Yeah, good. So you've actually narrowed it down here. Members is very common for member organizations like associations and other organizations where their customers are members, like some health insurance funds that I work with. Subcontractors, government, good. A common one that I get, which hasn't come up here, is the market, so the stock market. There might be, we've got regulatory bodies, so that's one. Yeah, that comes up. Volunteers, Good. Okay, so you can see there's a range of potential stakeholders here. So thanks for sharing that. I'm going to share with you a couple of examples of organizations and what they did in terms of their stakeholders. Okay, so one of them is an example of customers as stakeholders. So this is a story about Target. Target's a retail store in the USA, very similar to Target in Australia. And what they did about more than 20 years ago now, they used AI. They got into trouble for using AI because they sent out a mail order catalog. This is in the days that it was all sent out through the post to a teenage girl. She was 16. And in the catalog, they were advertising baby products and maternity products. And her parents, when they pulled out the catalogue from the letterbox and saw it addressed to their daughter, they were furious. The dad took the catalogue, marched down to his local Target shop, his Target store, asked for the manager and said, "What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get my daughter pregnant?" Now, it turned out that she was already pregnant. She just hadn't told her parents yet. And the reason that Target knew was not that because she was buying baby rattles and buying a pram or a bassinet. It's because there were changes in her eating patterns. And the Target's very basic AI at the time was able to predict that possibly she was pregnant, therefore it might be a good idea to send her catalogue for for baby products and maternity products. So that was a controversy at the time. This is a newspaper headline. They're talking about that story. So this is a challenge. So customers want to know how you're using AI. And nowadays, many customers kind of expect you to use AI, and they accept that when you're giving them your data, then that they'll have AI systems that are working behind the scenes to operate on that data. So if you're a member of Coles Flybuys membership program or Woolies Everyday Rewards program, so I'm an Everyday Rewards member, and I get benefits from using the card because I get discounts, special offers, Qantas frequent flyer points, even actual cash vouchers to use at Woolies. But I also know that Woolies is using my data to, well, let's face it, try and make me buy more. So when Woolies sends me every couple of weeks an email saying spend X number of dollars this week and you earn double the points, X always happens to be a tiny bit more than what I would normally spend. So it's customized using AI to try and give me things that are relevant to me, useful to me, but also of relevance and value to Woolies. Okay, so this, and if you're a Woolies customer or a Coles customer, you'd like to know, and some people would say you have a right to know, how they're going to use your data. And it's probably disclosed in the tiny print that the terms and conditions, but how much nicer would it be if that was publicly available? And for many organizations, that would actually give you a competitive advantage. If you are able to, as an organization, are able to say, this is how we're using AI to help you, and this is also how we're using AI internally. Okay, that's a retail example. A very different sector is the school sector. So I'm doing a lot of work in the education sector at the moment with schools who are very interested in AI because they were the kind of the canary in the coal mine when ChatGPT was first launched. And now schools are figuring out how to embrace AI. And that stakeholder, I wonder whether that came out in that list. So we've got patients. So another stakeholder in the school's environment are parents who are effectively the customers of, say, the independent schools, the private schools. And so the school leaders I'm working with are really interested in not only how AI is going to be used by students, they're probably more interested in how staff are using AI. They're most interested in that, but also they're interested in the parents and the rest of the school community. They also want to know how the school's using AI. And again, they're thinking about those two buckets. How are you protecting our kids from the dangers of AI? And also, how are you preparing our kids for an AI-enabled future? So they're looking at both sides of that. And sometimes schools bring me in to talk to their leadership team about crafting an AI policy, but also saying, what do we need to do as the next step? In fact, one school brought me back and said, can you run a presentation for our parents and our school community about, actually it wasn't only about AI, but about what we're doing as a school, which aligns very closely with your message about skills for the future and education for the future, so that they hear from an external person, a futurist, and sometimes they take the message better than hearing from the school principal or from internal. So again, you're thinking about your stakeholders. Okay, so when you're thinking about AI, think about, and your policy, think about your various stakeholders. I want to give you about a minute to just write down for yourself, before we get into questions again, who your stakeholders are. And so what I'll ask you to do here, if you can, just so everyone in the room knows how you're tracking with this. So just privately, don't type it in the chat, just write down for yourself who your key stakeholders are. And generally when I do this exercise, people come up with 3, 4 or 5 key stakeholders. And when you're done, when you've completed that, can you just type done in the chat room, and then we'll be able to see how we're tracking. Okay, so just right. Okay, thanks everyone. I want to give you to wait till about half the people are done, which is where we're at now. So let's if you've got any questions, let me remove that one. If you've got any questions, now's the time to ask questions. So this section is about stakeholders, but don't feel that you have to restrict yourself to that. So if you've got questions about anything that we've covered so far, please feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer whatever questions I can if they're relevant to our topic today. So please ask away, and we'll have, we're tracking well on time actually, so that's good. So I will have the opportunity to have another little Q&A session towards the end. So one of the things that like customers is probably the second biggest stakeholder group that comes up when I ask this, and whether you call them customers, clients, patients, parents, members, it's that those external stakeholders who are interested in the way that you're going to use AI. So I find that's very common, and when you're crafting your policy, even though mostly you might be crafting it internally, just keep in mind that which bits of this you want to expose and share with your customers. So I've had a look at a lot of corporate AI policies that are publicly available, and I will say actually that most of them only talk about the protect bucket. They only talk about, for customers, how are we going to keep your information safe. You very rarely see an AI policy, a public AI policy, saying we're going to use the latest cutting edge AI to make sure that we only give you the most relevant marketing, for example. Okay, Wendy says, how do organizations ensure AI systems are ethical and unbiased? So look, there's a big question there, Wendy, and the answer is that you combine what AI generates with your human intelligence on top of it. And the key to this, which we'll actually get to in the next section, is making sure that your people who are using AI understand what it can do, but also understand what it can't do. So there have been plenty of stories about people who used AI and then they just took the AI results and published them online, or sent them to court for in a legal case, or sent them to a Senate hearing. This happened late last year, where Australian academics generated something on AI. The AI made up some of the allegations against some companies, but the academics didn't even realize that it could make up stuff. So it's making sure that your people understand what AI can do and can't do, and therefore they know that they can apply their own human intelligence on top of that. Sam, yes, absolutely. So do you find some organizations have 2 policies, one for internal stakeholders, one for external? Yeah, exactly right, Sam. But the policy, the external stakeholders policy, tends to be a subset of the internal one. So it's not like they have 2 completely different policies. They have the internal one, and then they ask which of these are relevant for sharing externally. So, and that's the most logical way to do it. Lauren, what about copyright? Knowing what is newly generated content and what has been pulled from a source but not referenced. So yes, so that might be part of your that part of your AI policy, Lauren. And there are some ethical issues about some of the AI tools out there. So are they using material, like the material that they've collected to train their AI? Have they taken that, whether it's legal or not, have they taken it ethically or not? Especially with things like generating images. So you might, for example, I'll give you a very specific example. This doesn't necessarily need to go in the policy, but here's an example of that. So there's some backlash to ChatGPT and tools like that that generate images, saying that they've used images in their training data, which they had no right to use, copyright images. If you use, for example, Adobe, on the other hand, Adobe has an AI image generation tool, and they say that the images that they use are only the images that they've already paid artists a license fee or a royalty to be able to use those images. So you may want to put, you're not going to put that specific thing in there, but in your policy you may want to have something along those lines that say you think very carefully about the source of the copyright and the intellectual property rights of the source material when you're using AI. Okay, let me continue. Let me go to this third area here. And I wanted to make time for this third area because this is the one that really lights me up of all the three areas. I mean, I love working with clients around AI because it's such a new topic and people really want to know how to manage it and how to use it effectively. But the thing I really like the most is this bit, which is how do you bring people along on the AI journey, and how does your policy enable and leverage that? So again, if I show you those things that I showed you earlier, so those sort of questions about encouraging leaders and managers to experiment with the AI, to identify AI champions. Imagine if you had an AI policy that said these sort of things, that had these sort of things in there. Wouldn't that be great for the people in your team? So I'm going to do a little exercise here because it'll help you understand like at what level to pitch your AI policy, especially if you're doing the internal version of it for employees and your team members. Because what you need to put in the policy depends on what people already know and understand around AI. I'm sure that at the micro level, as a leader or manager, you may have worked with two different people, maybe at the same level. You give them the same task, but one of them, you give them the task and you know that they can go away and do it, and you don't have to worry too much, and if they get into trouble they'll come back or they'll figure out a solution. And the other person, you might give him exactly the same task, but you know that you've got to really give them step-by-step processes. You've got to have check-ins along the way, and you're going to put much tighter guardrails around the way they do that task. So let's talk about that because that'll affect how you write your AI policy. So I'm going to introduce you to my niece Abby. She's 19 at the moment. She's the one I went out to dinner with her and her boyfriend yesterday. And Abs, when she was 16, I taught her how to drive. And actually, let me ask you the question here. There may be people here who've taught a young person how to drive. If you have done that, can you use your little emoji reaction thing to tell me and tell everybody else here how you felt about teaching a young person how to drive? Okay, so were you excited about it? Were you really happy about it? Was it the scariest thing you've ever done? So let's just see, just use your little reaction emojis, and I'm interested to see what people are going, what people are saying. Okay, good. And so look, the thing is this, right? Like if you've taught a young person how to drive, especially if you've been driving for a long time, then it's amazing how many things that we take for granted as experienced drivers, but we have to explain from first principles to somebody who's doing it for the first time. So let me just do the little exercise for you here with Abby. I'm going to give you here 4 situations that Abby and I faced when I was teaching her how to drive. And in each one, I'm going to ask you, what does Abby need to know? What did Abby need to know to be able to navigate this in the future? Okay, so let me give you 4 scenarios. Okay, so the first one here is Abby's always going to be the green car. So Abby's coming along here and I've asked her, so this is a two-way road and In Australia, we drive on the left. I know there are international people here as well. So I've asked Abby to turn right into this road. Okay, pretty straightforward. There's no traffic coming this way, but there is a car here that's also indicated and wants to turn right here. So Abs, like we all know, we come up here. If there's no oncoming traffic, we can turn. But Abs comes up here and she stops. And I said, well, just can you explain why you stopped there? And she says, I know that you're supposed to give way to the right, and this car's on my right, so I stopped. And I go, oh, okay, she's either didn't realize that if she's on the continuing road, she has right of way, or maybe she's just forgotten that this is the second time that she was out operating heavy machinery out in public. So maybe she's forgotten. So what does she need? Can you just type in the chat? What does Abby need to know to be able to navigate this sort of situation more effectively in the future? I'm just checking what people are saying in the chat. Yeah, rules are road rules, right? Yep. So, okay, so I'm just going to call that info. So maybe she just needs to know the rules, right? That's all it is, and then she'll get it. The second situation is just one car. It's just Abby and I in this car. So Abs is here. We're going to go around this roundabout, and we're going to go straight. Okay, so we're going to come out here. Now, Abby's pretty good. Like, she knows the road rules. She knows the rules around roundabouts. In Western Australia, the rule is that if you're going straight, you don't need to indicate as you're entering the roundabout, but you have to indicate before the exit that you're about to take. So she has to indicate left at around about this point. So she knows that, but it's a bit tricky because she's holding the steering wheel to keep the wheels turning, and at the same time she has to kind of flick her finger to flick the indicator. And also she's in my car, which is a European car, so the indicator's on the left. When she's in her mum or dad's car, they've taken for a couple of lessons, the indicator's on the right. So she just fumbles a bit and stumbles a bit. So what does Abby need to know to be able to do that more effectively in the future? And Lauren says it was even harder in our day with manual. So yeah, practical skills, practice, experience, exactly. So just as shorthand, I'm going to call this skill. Okay, scenario 3, a very common scenario, which many of us face nowadays. It's this is a one-way road, but it's 2 lanes, and it's merging into a single lane. So Abby's here. There's another car here. And she wants to know what's the right thing to do to be able to merge properly. And lots of people still have trouble with this. Now, Abby's done enough driving by this stage that she's confident enough. If this red car is way back here, she's okay. She's okay. She'll indicate to say that she's coming into the merging bit, and she'll go ahead. She also knows that if the red car is way ahead, she's happy to hang back. She's a learner. She's in the left lane. She'll hang back. Probably even if the cars were next to each other, she'd hang back. But what if it's like this kind of middle situation where she's kind of ahead, but there's a car that's pretty close? What does she need to be able to navigate the situation competently in the future? When he says rules, experience on decision making, safety, decision making. Yeah, right, good. So decision making, and the answer that Melissa's given is the one I'm going to use here, judgment. So this is right. So it is about decision making. But sometimes that decision that you're making is a judgment call. Okay, there's no necessarily right or wrong answer. You can judge based on the speed of the car coming up on your right and your own speed and what the road conditions are and so on, and you'll make a judgment call. Okay, Sam says a fast car. Okay. Situation number 4. This is the last situation. I will admit that Abs and I didn't experience this, but lots of learner drivers do, because in Perth, so it's a road going in both directions. In Perth, this is a situation that's very close to the driver licensing centre in West Perth. So for people from Perth, this is Wellington Street. So it's a pretty busy street in this centre of Perth. So the examiners quite often take the learner driver to this spot and they say stop here and turn right. Okay, and they're turning right and they have to be able to manage these 2 lanes of traffic. Traffic coming from here, traffic coming from here. There are often parked cars here as well, which makes a vision difficult to see if cars are coming from here. And there's a little bit of a hill here, so it's even difficult to see these cars coming from here. So examiners, if they want to be really tough on drivers, will put them in this situation. Okay, so what does Abby need to be able to manage this situation? And Sam, to your response there, I was doing this for a group of leaders in Queensland, and one of them said, what does she need to do? Floor it and hope for the best. Okay, so you can't do that, right, in a situation, but it's judgment, risk, judgment. Yeah, but it's a different kind of judgment from here, right? So she needs, here it's just deciding to hang back or not. Here is actually, is it going to be safe? Caution, confidence, risk assessment. Okay, so let me tell you, good, right? So the correct answer to this, if you're in this situation as a learner driver, is you stop at the stop sign, and then you say to the examiner sitting next to you, I can't see, so I'm going to nudge forward until I can see and until it's safe to turn. Okay, so that's the right thing to do, and that's completely legal, so cops won't ping you for that. What many people would do in that situation, if you weren't a learner driver, is you might say, I'm going to turn left here, because then I only have to look at this lane of traffic and figure out a way that I can come around, and it's going to take me a tiny bit longer, but then I can come back onto this lane here, right? And many of us would do that. Some people would say, I know that just over here, I know we've come here and turned, but just over here is Collins Street, and there's sort of traffic lights there. So instead of me coming here, I'm going to go a little bit further and turn right at the lights. So with the green light and there's a green arrow, so I can do it completely safely. So in some situations, you'll avoid this situation altogether. So I'm going to call this wisdom. So sometimes you know the big picture, so that you say, if I'm in this situation, I'm not going to do what I've been asked to do because I know the big picture and I know there's another way, a wiser way to do it. Okay, so what does this all have to do with AI? I hope you're kind of getting the point. If you're thinking about your team and their competence with AI, think about what level are they at. Do they need information? Do they just basically need to know what is AI, what is ChatGPT, what can it do, what can't it do, what is limitations, what other AI tools are available, which one should I use when, and so on. It's just basic information. The second level is a skill level. We say, I've got the basic information, I just need to do a lot of skill and practice and trying it out, and hopefully, ideally, in a safe environment. The third level is where they have to exercise judgment, so that they've got the skills, but they're put in situations where they've got to make good decisions and sometimes judgment calls to be able to use the AI effectively. And the fourth level is the level of wisdom, where you say, oh, people are pretty good. They've got the information. They've done lots of practice. We've put them in real situations, perhaps with some guardrails, to help build their judgment so they can make better decisions. Now, we want to make sure that our policy and our framework is going to help them understand the big picture so they can make wise decisions about using AI. So, can I ask you, please, and this is our last little word cloud that we're going to use, if I ask you to choose one word, one of those words, info, skill, judgment, or wisdom, and type it in the chat, of where people are going to be at different levels, but broadly for your team or your organization, what level are you at the moment? Are you only at the information level, or do you think most people have the information and we're now looking at skills and judgment and maybe even wisdom? Okay, good. Okay, and so like it's interesting that here in this room, most people are still saying that their people are still at the information level. So we still have not much, we don't even know much about AI. Now, does that mean that that goes into your policy? If you're talking about the way that we use AI, especially the protect bucket, then maybe you don't need to put something in there about it. But if you're talking about the enable bucket, what are you going to put in there in your policy or your framework or your guidelines that say we work proactively to give people the best AI tools available, and then give them opportunities to learn and practice, and then put them in situations where they can make good decisions and exercise good judgment. You might think that's not the sort of thing you put in a policy, and you might be right. Okay, your policy may be all about the protect bucket, but my point in all of this is to say that while you, as a leader, you're thinking about AI policy, framework, or guidelines, don't ignore that enable bucket. The protect gives you, make sure that you've got brakes and seat belts and other safety features in your car. The enable helps people drive and drive you with those safety features in there. So whether or not it goes into your AI policy is up to you. I'd love the idea that your AI policy actually says publicly to people things like, we've identified internal AI champions, we've talked to employees about potential benefits. But even if it's not in there, that's okay, as long as you're thinking about what does this actually mean for us in terms of like how are we going to keep this alive? How are we going to keep going with AI? Okay, my last section for giving an opportunity to ask questions. I'll leave this up here while the questions come up. So we talked about these three things. So we have talked about all three things and the why you're creating it. So this is like the two buckets of protect and enable. We've talked about the who are your stakeholders, and I hope you've taken the time to make a list of who your key stakeholders are, so you keep that in mind when you're planning your policy. And then we talked about how. So what of these 4 levels are your team currently at? Yeah, and for me, I think, if I can offer a suggestion, it's obviously going to be different for different people, but I reckon the most important one of them is this one here, judgment. Okay, and the way that I test judgment, or ask leaders to test judgment, is to say, like, if you are delegating an AI task, actually applies to any task, but let's say an AI task to somebody, or somebody comes to you and says, you know what, I'm interested interested in doing this task, I'd like to do this, I'd like some help with this. Can you say to them, that's all right, Anne or Melissa or Kim, the people I'm seeing here, I trust your judgment. Can you say, I trust your judgment? If you can, and you know they've got good judgment, that means that you trust them to make decisions in the right, in an appropriate way. And good judgment means that they're going to do, in any situation, they're going to do one of 3 things. They'll either say, I'm going to follow the rules, and that's fine, or I know when it's okay to break the rules, because I know that's going to be all right. And the third one is I know when I don't know which of those first 2 things to do, so then I need to go back to somebody else and ask them. Okay, follow the rules, break the rules, or I'm not sure, I need to go back and ask. So I reckon if you're thinking about your team for the future, then look at building good judgment for your team members. Okay, I haven't seen any other questions come in yet. I will give you a few more seconds, but if not, I've got one last little activity that I can show you. Oh, and I want to give you a couple of additional resources as well. Okay. Wendy says, how do organizations measure the return on investment? Yes, okay. So in terms of policy and framework and guidelines, Wendy, you may put in there something that says we're continually measuring return on investment. Now you're asking how, so that might not go into your policy, that's okay. So the way you do it, and it's interesting with any sort of innovation project where it might be something new. When you've got clear projects that you've done many times before and you know the path ahead is pretty clear, it's easy to measure the return on investment because you're looking at the outcome and you say, to achieve this outcome, what's the investment that we need to put into place to achieve that outcome? When you're working on innovation projects or new projects or change projects, it's not so easy because you don't know what the final outcome is. So what you do instead is you measure the process. So you say, what have we learned this week? Or how many experiments have we tried? Or how many projects have we, like little mini pilot projects, have we tested and failed? How many times have we talked to customers about this? So those are the sort of questions. I did a blog post about this a few weeks ago. And so if you go back to my website and you can read that blog post, and there's a worksheet that you can download along with that blog post, which also gives you a list of questions that you can ask about measuring ROI. It's a really important issue here. It's a really important question because you don't measure it in the traditional ways that you measure ROI, where you're measuring it on outcome, because you actually don't know what the outcome is. You measure it on process to start with, and then later, as you evolve, you might look at outcome. Okay, any other questions? I can see a couple of other comments, but any other questions? Okay, let me share with you a couple of resources that I think you'll find really useful going forward from here. Okay, so we covered these three areas of why, who, and how. The first one is that, and that's this. Okay, so this document, which I've just shown you a little screenshot of as we've gone through today, is part of this Leveraging AI handout. Let me put for you in the chat, I'll give you the link there so you can download it right now if you're here live, and if you're watching the recording, I'll have a link with the recording as well. So what I do whenever I run an AI program is everyone, like, we customize, and everyone gets a customized workbook with the bits that are most relevant to them. What I've done for you here is I've kind of done the best of those segments from the workbook which are relevant for leaders, and particularly if you're thinking about your AI policy. So download that and you'll find not only that assessment but a few other things that will help you with AI in your leadership role. Okay, that's there for you free. You're welcome. Okay, the second thing that I've got for you is the organization that has a very good AI framework as a starting point for you is the Australian government. Okay, I know, surprise, right? So the Australian government and the Commonwealth, all the state education ministries and departments came together and they've created this framework. So you may know that when ChatGPT was first launched a year and a bit ago, most states, apart from South Australia, banned its use in state schools, in public schools. Now, independent schools could do what they like. So, we've got the situation where independent schools and staff and communities are already a year ahead of the state schools. But now that ban's been lifted, because of course, you can't ignore AI, and the states have come together and they've created this really good document around AI. And so Andrea says, I'm just going to pop this up here, right? Andrea's comment, which is right. We've got very strict guidelines around AI usage. In fact, in education departments for the last year, it wasn't only that it was banned in schools, it was banned through the whole department. Okay, I know that's certainly true here in Western Australia and may have been true elsewhere as well. Okay, so absolutely. And you should have good, robust guidelines about your use of AI, which is exactly the point of what we're talking about today. But this document here is fantastic. It's only about 8 pages, and it's not a policy, it's not a mandate, it's a framework. So just have a look at the title. I'm not going to give you the link here because you can just Google it. It's a public document. It's only about 8 pages, and it covers most of the protect things around AI and the use of AI in schools. It's a really good starting point, and whenever I work with school leaders, this is the document that we start with, and I'm recommending it to people in other sectors as well, because if you're looking to craft an AI policy, particularly the protect part of the AI policy, then this document is a really good start. It's not that great on the enable part, but it's pretty good for the protect part. Okay, so that's a second resource I'm going to recommend to you if you're looking at creating an AI policy or framework or guidelines. So this is a framework that they're recommending for schools, and it's not mandated. It's not saying that you have to do it this way, but there's some really good guidelines in there, and I think they'll spark some ideas for you. And if you want to work with me, I'd love to work with you. So I do run a number of things, AI for leaders. And by the way, so I went and registered the domain name gihan.ai. So if you go there, it'll go to the page on my website, which talks about these next 3 things. So AI for leaders is either a masterclass for a group, or it's with senior leaders looking at their AI policy. So some of the things we're talking about here, but obviously in more depth because we're crafting it for your own organization or team. I've also got a keynote about leveraging AI, and this is when I speak at conferences and they say, can you talk about AI? I don't talk about the nitty-gritty, here's how to use ChatGPT, because it's boring for a conference keynote presentation. I talk about leveraging AI. So it's a broader conversation to get people understanding what's possible, what some of its limitations are, and how not to be scared by it. And this other one is the practical one. So AI at work is like a masterclass. So it's for people, it's just roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty, and let's try some of these tools like ChatGPT. And we talk about how we can use, particularly how you can enable it. We talk about some of the protect stuff as well, but it's mostly around productivity and enhancing the customer experience. So for example, I'm doing a session in Geraldton in Western Australia soon for tourism operators, showing how they can use AI tools to enhance their, first of all, their productivity in general, but also things like their marketing ahead of time, their ongoing customer experience, their follow-up, and so on. Okay, so if you're interested in any of those three things, please get in touch with me, gihan.ai or gihanpereira.com. Okay, there's a question, JF. I'm not quite sure what that's pertinent to. Do you think this will change once they're more familiar with it? If you're talking about those like those 4 levels, like, will that change? Yeah, possibly. So this is one area. Okay, response to a comment. But let me take this opportunity. So if you're writing your AI policy and a lot of your people are already at the level where they're exercising good judgment, you don't necessarily have to put a lot in there about information and skills. On the other hand, if they're mostly at the info stage, which is what we found in the room here, then maybe there needs to be more in there. Certainly, if it's not in the policy, in the way that you bring people on the journey. Okay, and that will change over time. Okay, so I'm going to, yeah, right. So I'm bringing up this comment from Andrea. We're putting in the first chatbot in Public Service WA on our website based on these guidelines. Right, okay. I'm not sure which, the Digital Government Office guidelines. Yeah, so it's good. If you've got access to a large organization who's creating guidelines for you, maybe some of that work is done for you. I will warn you, though, to be careful about that and still really consider very carefully what the guidelines mean for you and your organization and your particular team. Because I've worked with some large organizations and they're saying we're going to provide these blanket AI guidelines, which everybody in the organization has to be compliant with and conform to. And can I say, now that we've done this session, you understand, you probably get that most of those guidelines are in the protect space, and there's very few of them in the enable space. And for us as leaders, I think about both. And again, like, I don't mind whether you call them guidelines, framework, policy. As you're thinking about going forward as a leader with AI, make sure you include both of those areas in there. Okay, and my last message, which I end a lot of my presentations with, is that, look, I hope you got some value from this. If you want to do the chat reaction emoji, sorry, not the chat, the reaction emoji to tell me how you feel about AI now or how you feel about this presentation, please do that. And I hope you got some value from that and some practical things that you can take away and put into action. I always say to people, start before you're ready, because this is not going away and it's not going to slow down either. So especially with something like AI, which is growing exponentially, don't wait to have all your ducks lined up in a row. Don't wait till things get quiet, which unfortunately a lot of leaders did this last year. They said, oh, this AI thing, we can look at it later. We don't even need to worry about it in this financial year. And then suddenly it exploded. So start before you're ready, because the world won't wait for you. If you want to get in touch with me, all my contact details are on my website, gihanpereira.com. Please get in touch. And if we can work together, great. If you want to ask me a question, drop me a line by email as well. That'd be great too. Thanks everyone. All the best on your AI journey, and I'll see you in the future. Bye for now.